and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashew, and I am joined by two people you have heard before. Actually, I don't think you've heard one of them separately from the other, talking Maggie the Odd.
Hello.
And the co-host of the one-season show, and Scary Stories We Tell, and award-winning screenwriter, and Maggie's best friend, Jess Byard.
That last one's the most important.
That's why I left it. That's why I left it at the end.
To be fair, Maggie is also an award-winning director and animator for the same thing.
That's true. I know. Yeah, award-winning director Maggie the Odd. Sorry, shit. Yeah. We're gonna throw these all out. I mean, we need to be one-to-one parody here. So
you can hear the authenticity in that title.
I mean, hey, you both won the award, so you know. It wasn't like co-winners. It's you.
The award, do we?
Yeah. But on this episode of the Culture Cast, we are going to be finishing out Indian Cinema Month with a look at Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, otherwise known from here on out as DDLJ.
तुम मुझे मिले हो, मुझे परेशान किए जा रहे हो।
बड़े बड़े देशों में ऐसी छोटी छोटी बातें होती रहती हैं। अगर ये तुझे प्यार करती है तो ये पलट के देखेगी। पलट। मैं आ रहा हूँ सर, मैं आ रहा हूँ। तुम मुझसे प्यार करती हो?
सबसे ज्यादा।
मुझ पर भरोसा है?
खुद से ज्यादा।
मैं यहाँ तुम्हें अपनी दुल्हन बनाने के लिए आया हूँ और तुम्हें यहाँ से ले जाऊंगा तभी जब तुम्हारे बाबूजी खुद तुम्हारा हाथ मेरे हाथ में देंगे।
So, the film is directed by Aida Chopra, produced by Yash Chopra. It stars Shah Rukh Khan, otherwise known as SRK. It also stars Kajol, Amrish Puri, Farinda Jalal, and Satish Shah, along with an actor that's already shown up once this month, Anupam Kher, as Raj's father. The film stars Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol as two NRIs, otherwise known as non-resident Indians living in London. Raj's family is very liberal. Simran's family is very conservative, and they meet, fall in love, and then this is a very long movie. Just like all the other movies this month, there's a lot going on. So just know that it's a very non-traditional, traditional love story that kind of broke the mold of Indian cinema in 1995, and it's been showing on screens for the last 20 years in Mumbai. Yes, that's a real thing. Look it up. So let's talk about the movie. Maggie, I guarantee you this is the first time you'd seen it, because I don't know how it couldn't have been, frankly, because I think it's the first time for all of us. What did you think of your first viewing of DDLJ?
Oh my gosh. It was an event of a movie. But, oh my gosh, it's just a really sweetheart story, and it was a lot of fun. I'm familiar with Bollywood movies, but you're right. This is the first time for me watching this, and it was a hoot.
It was, as we like to say, a hoot.
Yeah, maybe a hoot and a holler, but definitely a hoot.
This owl gives two hoots straight up. What about you, Jess?
Obviously, yes, this was my first time seeing it, since technically this is only my second time watching Indian cinema for this podcast and in general. And yeah, again, like with Robot, and I'm just continuously surprised and kind of just impressed at how all of these movies manage to be 3 hours plus, and yet I'm not bored for any of it, and especially in a genre that is not. I mean, this is a romantic comedy for
it is 100%.
Yeah. We know it's a very simple story, romantic comedy. Which is not at all my genre. I don't really ever enjoy them, but this I thought was fantastic. I thought that the leads, everyone in it is super charismatic, but the leads are fun. They're great to watch. They're both super cute. And I kind of had a good time watching, what's his name?
Our good friend Amrish Puri, otherwise known as Mola Ram from the Temple of Doom.
Yeah, and like that last sequence, I thought he was like going to straight up rip that guy's heart out for a minute.
Yeah, he had the stare going.
Like, all right, Kali Ma, let's go.
To be fair, though, Amrish Puri kind of always has the stare going.
I know, it's so good.
It's like a perma stare.
But we get to see him sing and dance.
I know,
and it was great.
That was a treat.
For a minute.
So this is the first time I'd seen this film. Again, now I think this is my 5th or 6th Indian cinema film, I want to say. But I mean, the ones that we've been watching this month, outside of the ones that I had already seen, which was only Robo beforehand, we had been kind of watching the quote unquote, like the tenets of the Indian cinema movement. I mean, these are the pillars. I mean, maybe not Robo, but from well, yeah, I agree for a number of reasons. But DDLJ, obviously Sholay. I mean, these films are the pillars of Indian cinema, especially a film like DDLJ that's been in a theater for 20 plus years, which is impressive to say the least. I mean, I can't think of another film that's been sitting in a theater for 20 plus years that still has people consistently coming to watch it. We could talk about Rocky Horror, but that doesn't count. I mean, that doesn't count in the same way because they're not showing Rocky Horror every day. This is constantly being played every day at a movie theater in Mumbai, the Maratha Mandir Theater. So with kind of all of the kind of important stuff out of the way, this film is amazing. I mean, I sat down last night at midnight to watch half of this movie. I ended up watching the whole thing. I was up until 3:30 in the morning watching this film. And I do stay up late, but I normally don't sit and watch a 3-hour movie at midnight for a number of reasons. And about 2/3 of the way through the film, I was like, well, I could go to sleep, but I kind of want to see what happens.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to sit and watch the whole thing. And like both of y'all have already said, everything about this movie is amazing, from the music, from the musical numbers, which are, I would say, the best musical numbers that I've seen in a Bollywood film so far. To, Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol are, they're perfectly cast, obviously. Shah Rukh Khan is now, one of the highest paid, most popular actors in Indian cinema, and it goes to show why in this film. But yeah, this movie should make you feel embarrassed to watch American romantic comedies because they don't put in half of the effort that this film did. And that just, again, to your point, Jess, just goes to show Indian cinema, again, I said it before this month, I'll continue to say it, it is doing things with cinema that are so unique and yet so endearing that I've fallen in love with Indian cinema by watching all of 5 movies.
Absolutely. Well, and it helps that that they actually took their culture and doubled down on it. They didn't look to Western culture and what was successful. They would pick and choose, but the fact that it's steeped in all of that culture and it's so fun, and even the dance numbers are just they're so wildly large for what a small production this would have been in the end. It's fantastic.
I think, one of the things that struck me about this movie, and this, remind me again what year it came out?
1995.
1995. So this movie, and I think that it has a lot to do with the cinematography and how they like will frame people at times, but there's all throughout, I kept getting like just hints of like classic 80s style, and that's guaranteed they're close. B, I got a lot of just sort of air of classic Hollywood in how it was filmed and how, there's a specific scene, I think, and it's where her father and Raj are talking, and her father is more in the forefront of the shot. And I don't know, there's just something about that like I immediately felt like I was watching something from like 1943, where it was just this like really nicely framed, sort of closely shot, but also still kind of gave you that like nice little like touches of seeing the background, because obviously like you want the scenery, the backgrounds, the sets in these, and all of Bollywood films are fantastic.
It does feel like a film from the 90s, to your point, but it, like you said though, Jess, it does do a lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting, if that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of serious stuff going on in this movie, and there's a lot of like cultural progressivism, but also understanding your culture, because that's kind of the, I mean, if this were an American film, you would have had the character of Raj steal Kajol away.
Right.
Or Simran. I keep calling her by the actress's name, but Simran is the character she plays. You would have had him steal her away. And in this film is 3 hours, because the last hour of this film is the character of Raj refusing to steal her. I mean, they spend an entire hour. I mean, that's the thing about Indian cinema that I think I've been really appreciating is these, like, I don't need to see a sequel to this movie, because I have gone on a legitimate journey with these characters from the beginning of the film all the way to the end. Like you said, Jess, this film's 3 hours long, but I don't feel like they wasted a single scene, and every scene built upon the previous one.
Right, and that's
which
how
made it so good.
And that's how I felt about, Robot. It was the same thing where I was like, at any point, I don't know if it's, if it's cultural storytelling differences, if it's the, inclusion of the musical numbers and just, all the kind of outlandish things that we see. But for some reason, when, there are plenty of American and, Western, I guess I should say, movies that are 3 hours and some long that I like, but they always have points in them that I feel like drag. And like you said, like I feel like I know these characters. I feel like these people are, these actors are the people in the movie. I think that at least for me, especially when it comes to watching foreign film, it's easier for me to kind of jump into the world, because since I'm not a native, I don't speak the language. I'm not judging so much on the actual, I guess, delivery of lines and things like that. So it doesn't take me out of it. So I feel like I can get more wrapped up in the characters. Plus, reading the subtitles, I think, does also force you to pay a certain more amount of attention than you would be otherwise.
As I say, you can't exactly watch foreign cinema on your phone, and I think we're all.
Oh, I'm sure you can.
I'm sure we're all guilty of that. I know I am, but like, it's impossible to watch these films. Let me rephrase it. It's impossible to watch these movies and understand what's going on, and fully appreciate the dialogue and the character building if you're on your phone. And I honestly think that might actually become the new excuse for why people don't watch foreign cinema. Is they can't do something else at the same time. And it's like, why are you even watching fucking movies then? Like, why are you, if you're going to put something on, pay attention to it. I mean, I'm not trying to be a dickhead or anything, but I mean, as we all are guilty of it, like, I'll put something on in the background that I've seen a million times, but if I'm watching something new, I tend to give it more attention. But with something like this, you have to give it your full attention, because otherwise you will literally have no idea what's going on.
Well, it's just so engaging. Otherwise, I was thinking about it more so since Jess brought up the classic Hollywood 1940s like vibes that it gets. It reminds me a lot of Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia, right down to the intermission at the halfway point. But they were so epic in scope, but it was a real like kind of intimate window into these people's lives for this duration of 3 hours. And you're right, it stacks really well on top of each other to escalate the storyline so that by the time that the crazy buildup happens, like, you're standing up and rooting for the character, even though, like, he's getting the shit kicked out of him. It's like, oh, that's sad, though.
Excuse me, it wouldn't be an Indian cinema film without brutal violence at the end.
But he made getting the shit kicked out of him look good. Like,
well, and then he kicked the shit out of them in, like, pseudo kung fu, like martial arts. Oh man,
yeah. And that's
he even did like the kick when he was on the ground. Like when he's on the ground, he kicks the guy again to keep him on the ground. I was like, this is straight up martial arts. Yes. Where did this character learn this in the last 3 hours?
By the power of love, Chris.
Oh, okay.
It's the same way he learned how to play piano.
Oh, that scene was so good.
That's my favorite scene in the entire movie. Absolutely.
Oh,
the what's that song called? Rukh Dil Diwane. It is it's comedic, but not overly comedic, and it's a hell of a bop. I think all the songs in this movie are actually. Every single song in this movie is like, again, we're native English speakers, so it's hard to sing along to non-native, non-English songs, but you can try.
Oh, dude, I was just dancing to him. I would kill to be a background dancer in all of those numbers.
I mean, the one towards the end of the film, Medni Laga de Rakhna, is played at Indian weddings still to this day. I mean, it's amazing. I that's the song that you were talking about, Jess.
Mm-hmm.
Jess. Hello, Jess. That's the song you were talking about.
Indian name.
Yeah, right. That's the song that's the song that Amrish Puri sings in, and it's like you don't expect that. Like when that happened, I was like, okay, wow. Like
I didn't think it was going to get cooler, but it fucking did.
Yeah, it really did. There is so much going on in this movie.
I think the other reason that I kind of feel like I'm getting like classic movie vibes off of it is because, the type of romantic comedy that it is very, especially at the beginning with the train and then the piano and everything, it's very like sight gags and physical comedy that reminds me sort of like, and it happened one night, sort of slapstick romantic movie. And those, I like that stuff. I like, the, cheeky, cute romance shit. What I don't like is, like you said, like if we were watching this in an American movie, it would have been, and I'm not saying that this movie isn't necessarily predictable because it is a story that you can kind of figure out who's going to be fine at the end and what's going to happen.
To be fair, Indian cinema does pull some curves and some punches. And it really sometimes decides to just upend the apple cart at the end.
Yep.
So,
but it is a romantic comedy, and the rule says that they have to end up together.
Right. Dad could have let go before the train started. Yeah. I don't know. I'm like, that's a dick move, man.
And I do think that it's because as a cultural difference in watching it, where he's like, no, I have to ask your dad. And I'm like, fuck that, just leave. Like, what the?
Oh, no, that's romantic.
He's a douche.
Maggie's right.
It's romantic in the movie because he let her go. But if it were real life, it would have been far less romantic.
I'd still appreciate that ending, though.
I mean, again, it does really speak to the culture of the time. I mean, this film was made. The filmmakers, they went out of their way to target non-resident Indian audiences. So they were trying to blend that kind of, because there's kind of the two opposing forces pulling if you're a non-resident Indian. You want to be true to your family and your heritage, but at the same time, it's hard to when you're somewhere else. Especially a completely different culture, be it London or the United States or westernized culture. And I agree with you, Jess, that like, all things considered, it's like, let's just run away. But
right.
At the same time, like, I really appreciate that this film went out of its way to confront something important and serious. Because, again, I feel pretty comfortable in saying American romantic comedies, one of the things that a lot of people have a problem with is the fact that they, don't do that. They don't actually have anything to say. They're just
no, and it's often usually not something quite as romantic as like this. It's usually a situation where it's like I felt I was in love. Like the meet cute moment is never in like an American romantic comedy is far less like whimsical and coincidental than how, you know, our two leads meet in this movie. Mostly it's just like, oh yeah, I'm married or dating this person, but this person's mean to me. And this person's like the person of my dreams. So I'll leave this other person and go with them. And it's like, okay, cool. Thanks.
And, you know, I mean, the film is guilty of a couple things. It's guilty of kind of being, like we've already mentioned, very predictable. But I think the performances by Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol and Amrish Puri, I mean, everyone in this film puts in a fantastic performance. I mean, even someone as kind of, you know, would probably be really sidelined in an American film like Pooja Ruparel, who plays the Simran's sister, Chukti. They, you know, in this film, they give everyone an opportunity to do something. And I really appreciated that because it's very rare to see in a romantic comedy anyone other than the main characters and maybe the main character's parents being given anything to do.
Right. Right. It actually made the ensemble cast worth it.
Yeah.
Well, it also made like all of the parents in this movie are obviously present. And they're also, you know, characters that you enjoy. Even her dad, like, yeah, he's making shitty decisions for her, but it's also built in this, like, you know, long-standing tradition, and he and his wife love each other, but it's you don't fully hate any of them, and they're not there to be like the stereotypical like mother-in-law or whatever like they would be in an American movie. And we should mention, since we're talking kind of like about the differences of different cultures, this movie talks about them themselves because our leading man, Raj, is non-traditional. Was raised in London. So he and his father are completely just not of the world of arranged marriages. So it's even dealing with their own culture in like in a modern time and having to evolve with that.
And then you have someone like Amrish Puri who, like you've already mentioned, refuses because he idolizes and kind of puts on a pedestal Punjab, where he's from, so much so that he can't, you know, it takes him until essentially the final frame of the film to overlook and kind of change a little bit and see that, yes, Punjab is not the end all be all. And just because you're back in your, you know, in your homeland doesn't mean that everything is A-okay and everything is great, because it's not, because the character of Kuljit is a terrible person.
Yes. Well, he's like the Brahm. Like when him and his friends come in, I was like, okay, Beauty and the Beast, I got you.
Yep. No, I just appreciate the whole entire standoff that Raj had with her father at the very end, where he's like, no, he knows what will make you happy. Like totally playing into, if this is the cultural aspect that you're going to die on, if you value this more than your daughter's happiness, then I understand where we stand. Right. But the fact that he was like up to the end, getting slapped back and forth with slaps that sounded like cannon fire, like that's pretty noble. But to be able to just speak back and be like, this is different from what I would see as important, but I know that's not how you think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and especially after having, you know, like getting the just shit slapped out of him for a good 10 minutes before he even gets to go off on that spiel.
Oh, definitely. He was willing to just get slapped around and then head out.
And, you know, it is kind of interesting to watch a romantic comedy that isn't westernized. I mean, it's westernized to a point. I mean, I would say they spend about half of the film in a Western setting, and then the other half they spend it in Punjab and India. But it is interesting, again, because, Jess, you and I watched a Indian cinema sci-fi film that still felt very distinctly Indian.
It did, yeah.
Yeah. And then you watch this film, which the cultural aspects that they're talking about feel distinctly Indian. And the way the characters interact with each other is distinctly Indian. And I appreciate that because not that I would ever have been worried, but there is a kind of concern that when you make a genre film you may lose some of your cultural identity in making that film to kind of tailor it better to the genre as opposed to tailoring the genre to your cultural background.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, you also see that in like, there's a big difference because I don't know how the, how marketing and stuff happens over in Bollywood, over in like the Indian filmmaking world, as far as like overseas stuff, because I know that especially for like American movies and big budget, like Chinese blockbusters and stuff like that are often made with a Western point of view in mind because they're trying to capitalize on as much, audience as they can. That doesn't really feel like it's the case with, at least with the movies that we've watched. I could be, I don't have a wealth of knowledge as to other Bollywood and Indian cinema, but for this, it seems like they've taken the, standards of movie making and storytelling and, every story is non-original to a point. So, I mean, they do a really good job of, like we said, this whole thing it feels like a much more cohesive and full movie that you're actually getting something out of because it's so deeply entrenched in its culture. And like you said, it's trying to say something about its own culture and, how divided it became even within themselves.
And how constantly at odds they are with themselves.
And there's like, whimsy and flouncy, goofy romantic comedy.
I'd say 75% of the movie is like very light in tone.
Oh God, yeah.
I
mean, anytime a song happens.
Yeah, every scene with them in Europe is pretty, for the most part, with Simran and Raj are pretty kind of over the top and kind of fanciful reality. I mean, there's a song that essentially is sung between the two of them where Simran is drunk the entire time.
Yes.
I love it.
Oh my gosh.
It's great.
It's like a full musical number while the characters are both drunk.
Well, and again, an American movie, they would have slept together.
Yeah. And they don't.
In this one, he was like, no, seriously, I can't. Like, you're going to really regret this because, as even when we were watching Robot, which was far more, based in a non-reality than this movie is, they still hit that point where he rescues the girl from the fire, but because he brings her out and she's not wearing any clothes, that's like just as worse because of her honor. And it's just, I do like seeing those things that like creep up even in the middle of all this goofiness where it's like, no, this really matters though. I cannot do this.
And again, I mean, I like that that's part of this because again, like I had mentioned before, this film was made to appeal to what one would consider if you live in India, maybe a more progressive group of Indians. These are the NRIs, the non-resident Indians who are watching, going to another country and watching their culture change with the country that they live in. And I appreciate that the film doesn't lose that because it's a very easy slope to go down, to lose kind of all of the important stuff that makes your culture important. And I really appreciate that the film is like, no, we're going to talk about this. Because like you said, Jess, if it was an American film, half of the stuff that happens in this movie wouldn't have happened because they're like, it's not important. They just want to see like dick and fart jokes and possibly nudity.
Right.
And
exactly. And
unfortunate, really.
Yeah, because at the end, like, there really feels like there's nothing to be gained in a standard romantic comedy because it doesn't feel like there's any real consequences of anything happening. I'm not sure you could
make an American romantic comedy or a westernized Western American comedy rom-com for 3 hours long. Like, I feel like you'd go crazy.
I don't know. I think it's possible. I just think the way that it's successful in this is because of the pacing. It keeps it fresh throughout, where you get the slow buildup with why they're in love and how this all goes down and like why he's pursuing her so like hard. But because it's interlaced with musical interludes, with just like shenanigans or like cutting back to seeing these little interactions with everybody else, I think it's plausible. It's just they don't waste time in going through where it's like, we need to get this far by this point, but we need to make sure that we establish this is the type of relationship that they have. So by the time you actually get to the hard-hitting stuff, you've been through that journey. I think for a U.S. audience to be able to get around that, I mean, honestly, it was pretty monumental when Lord of the Rings came out and they were like 2 hours long. Now every movie is 2 hours long, but a few of them are successful in making that time not slog on. It's just they're so secure in their identity, and I'm sure that the marketing team behind this were way happier with an artistic project that represented their culture well, while still having all of those little points that other people would be able to relate to, just by having a simple story. Because it's nothing like crazy different from any other romance like storyline we have seen, but the fact that it was so genuine and they went like full force into every single number that they did and every moment, they didn't waste time. I think it's plausible. I just think it can't be a big company that's behind it.
Well, I think the other question is, do American audiences as a whole care as much?
Do they have a stomach for a 3-hour rom-com? Like, do they care?
Hey, man.
Do they care? Like you said, Jess, do they care about going on this journey?
I don't have a 3-hour American one.
Oh, I'm going to bring up Dr. Zhivago again. That was a 3-hour romance movie, and it was awesome.
But romance and romantic comedy are different.
Fair.
I feel like Dr. Zhivago is more of a romantic epic.
Well,
right?
I'd say that this would qualify.
Like with real world consequences, whereas romantic comedies tend to exist in a more, non-reality reality.
Well, when I release the musical of Dr. Zhivago as a rom-com, you guys are going to be so sorry.
We're gonna be it's gonna be Jess and I in the front row eating our words, just like, well, we should have known better. We tempted her and she did it, and now we have to eat our words.
And this is 6 hours long.
Yeah. So this film was meant to appeal to non-resident Indians. Did either of you read who they wanted to cast in the role of Raj?
No.
Oh, do either of you want to take a guess? It is a very American actor. One of the most, if not, I would say the most successful male actor. One of the most successful. You're close.
Oh, man, there's no way I'm guessing it.
Tom Cruise.
I want that would have been horrible.
Gosh.
Can you imagine Tom Cruise in a Indian cinema film attempting to... here's the thing. I don't know if I'm assuming they had to have changed the script.
Right. You would have been an American, not from England.
Right.
Oh, it would have been so much worse.
Or I guess he could have been like an American expat living in London.
Right. I mean, yeah, it would have been a white man come save the lady from her evil culture type thing. That would have not come up. That would have come across gross. A lot worse.
Yeah.
I honestly think if Tom Cruise had been in this movie, it may have been interesting in a different way. It would have had, because I mean,
Down is like one of the worst movies ever.
It would have been talking about some of the things it talks about in this film, but not others. It would have been talking about a different kind of cultural progressivism.
Right.
As opposed to we're pushing our cultural progressive forward. It's others are coming in and helping us push it forward. And you kind of see that in this film anyways, considering how they're both, non-resident Indians anyways. It's just both of the actors happen to be Indian. So you don't add the aspect of another culture coming in completely.
Right.
Right.
I don't think it would have been terrible. I think it might have been interesting. No. I don't think it would have been as good as this film ends up being.
Correct. Because, man, I hate Raj's performance is just so endearing. It's like, I mean, it would have been a bit more pivotal, and it might have done decently with Western audiences because of that, just the name attached. But it seems like a bigger conversation than what they wanted to have. Mm-hmm. It seems a lot more convoluted if they went that path as opposed to this, where it's just far enough.
Because this came out in, what'd you say, 1995? Mm-hmm. So that would have been like Jerry Maguire era.
Mission Impossible?
Impossible, Tom Cruise, yeah. Yeah, I like how, what we get here as far as Raj being kind of like a goofball. Like, I guess if they were going for like 80s Tom Cruise, maybe, but no, I don't like Tom Cruise, so this is my general problem. But
I mean, I like Tom Cruise the actor, but I don't like Tom Cruise the person, and those are two things that are very hard to separate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Much to his own choice. I mean, it's hard to separate the two because of the things that he's such a vocal supporter of. Scientology, obviously. But I don't think I would have enjoyed the film nearly as much. Because, again, Shah Rukh Khan is just, I mean, the guy is charming.
Yeah.
He is charismatic, and he's got enough charisma for the whole room and then some.
Right. Well, and the deliveries, the way that he pulls off the dance numbers, it has that perfect energy to it where it's like, yeah, this is goofy as hell. Like the first part of the film, I really wanted to hate him. I really, really wanted to. But the church scene happened where he's watching her pray, and then he asks about it, and then he goes back and he's like, hey, just could you give her whatever she wants, please? It's like, crap, I love this guy.
Yeah, when he's like he doesn't know how to do the cross, so he just gives him a thumbs up. Like, it's cool.
Yeah, I know. And then it comes back at the end, like,
And that's, I think, again, that goes to us being able to spend more time with these characters because, yeah, he's kind of a shit for like the first half hour or so of this movie. And if we were dealing in just an hour and a half long runtime, that might be too much and not enough for us to really come around to him eventually and ever actually feel like anything's genuine. But it does feel like his character, like, yeah, he starts out as just kind of, playboy shithead who's just trying to have a good time, and then he realizes, oh shit, maybe I do have these sort of deeper feelings inside of me. I am capable of this. I do still have this affinity for my culture in so far as to have to confront this man to ask for this woman's hand who I've never met and who he hates me, and we actually get to develop with these characters. And I felt that way about Robo. I feel that way about this movie. And if I continue to watch Bollywood, which I think I obviously will, I hope that that's a standard throughout all of them.
I can tell you with the things that I've seen so far, it is.
Yeah.
It's just, it's shocking to me how much time they spend building these characters into fully fleshed out real people.
Mm-hmm. Right. I feel spoiled.
Yeah, and then you watch an American film and you're just like, guys, it ain't that hard.
Right, I don't even remember the main character's name.
Yeah, it's like, it's not that hard to do a good job. It's really not. You just don't care enough.
And a lot of it also is like this whole idea of Western audiences not having the ability to sit and watch a movie for 3 hours. Now, I personally don't think that would be a majority of people. I think that if you're going to make movies like this or, any other genre, but as long as it's a good movie, people will watch it.
Agreed.
But if you are constantly just shilling out, passable hour and 20 long minute movies, you're just doing it to make money because it takes time to make movies that are longer than that. It takes time and you also have to be willing to take a chance on your audience. And unfortunately, in my time working at movie theaters, both in the corporate and small scale, they don't want to. Studios don't want to take time on audiences, and theaters don't want to take time on audiences. They want guaranteed money in the bank every time. So
exactly.
We don't get to have this, we're not even giving our audiences a chance to maybe see if they like this. Like, sure, you sit and binge. I mean, now is the perfect time to do it, right? We binge watch 4, 5, 6, 10 hours of television in one day because each episode's 25 minutes to 45 minutes long. And yet you can't release a movie that takes much more time to actually develop its characters and story in a meaningful way.
Well,
there's some cognitive dissonance there. There is some cognitive dissonance. There really is.
Just a bit, but it's also under the guise of like TV shows that people binge where they do actually get in that character development. My whole thing, and I'm gonna get a little wild with my comparison here, so bear with me, gang.
Hold on to your hats.
Yes, exactly. So I was thinking about it, and I really love the pacing of this. as long as this movie is, I think it's because of the concise nature of this. Because while you guys were talking about the ultimate, like, kind of cultural difference that it has, the way that they present Raj's experience with this, because he wants to know the culture for her sake. And so as he's going through this, after lying and getting into this family, every small interaction is essentially like him learning more about the culture and how to approach these people, and like ultimately respectful, even though he lied to get there. It's still shady, but the thing that I was thinking about was my big fat Greek wedding.
No, I get that. I can see that.
I would say that that's a pretty apt comparison, and you know what? I secretly like that movies.
I'm lightweight a huge fan.
I like that movie.
Exactly. And I think it's for the same reason. Here's this guy that doesn't know dick all about Greek culture. Mm-hmm. And every interaction with her family, which it reinforces the fact that we do have an ensemble cast with people with multiple like different personalities and approaches to this culture. And he is constantly getting spoon-fed all of this information as like our conduit. So we get to understand, oh, they don't know what a bunt cake is. Mm-hmm. How wacky. But I think they do that in just as successful of a manner, where you get to see his interactions and him understanding, no, I can't run. Mm-hmm. I want to get permission, because that will make her feel a lot less like a piece of shit for just being like, all right, bye.
Right. And it would make, it avoids any kind of further conflicts down the road that would then, be otherwise kind of like goofy things happening. Yeah. Right. You want to start off on the right foot, and he makes that effort. And like with my big fat Greek wedding, I think it is that inclusion of that more, not necessarily an ensemble cast, but just a bigger cast, with these sort of really rich side character actors.
Right.
Or just characters, but that we get to like actually fall into a world as opposed to a standard, rom-com of boy meets girl at coffee shop, and then series
with their
of
tropes surrounding them.
Series of, oh, we don't like each other because we're so different from each other. Oh, but then something cute happens. Oh, then we're mad at each other. Oh, now we're married.
Jess, I also feel like you're a fan of My Big Fat Greek Wedding because Joey Fatone is in it.
Not my favorite.
It's not JC Chazé, I know.
It is not JC Chazé.
But it is still one part of NSYNC, yes?
Yes, the E and the Y.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that comparison is really apt, Maggie, because there is a lot of similarities. I mean, unfortunately, with that film, they don't give the film enough time to do what this film does, which is build those characters up.
I bet if My Big Fat Greek Wedding lasted 3 hours, I would still sit my ass down and watch it.
That's fair. Actually, you know what? I think that you might be right in that might have been like the chance that we had to, if they had made that movie 3 hours long, honestly, like my mom loves that movie. I know a ton of moms that love that movie. I feel like it would have like kind of broken through in that. And at the time, I can't remember what the main actor's name was, the guy in it.
John Corbin.
Yes, John Corbin. At the time, he got famous off Sex and the City?
I thought wasn't he on Northern Exposure?
I don't know. I didn't watch that show. But I'm pretty sure he was also one of Carrie's boyfriends in Sex and the City. He was not so big.
Yeah,
good looking dude.
But that was my line of thinking, because as I was watching this, I was picking up like weird vibes from like movies that were made in the 60s, 70s of like US culture, like, because it was so cheesy at first. And the more I thought about it, I was thinking about the other movies in my life where it's like, I'm going to hate this movie, whatever. I didn't walk into this movie thinking that, because I knew at least there was going to be bomb-ass musical numbers. But a lot of US movies, I hate just randomly picking up and being like, yeah, this will be a good time. But that one like snuck in. And I think it was because the interactions reinforced the narrative so much. and being conscious of that stuff, like just writing in general on personal projects, as well as intaking all of this media, I have a deep appreciation for being able to understand when to be concise and rapid fire, and as well as very thoughtful and very slow moving. Like her going through that field of flowers to come across the cow with the bell. It's like that took forever, but it was so worth it just because it was one of those like quieter moments after all of the drunken debauchery and running around and missing trains.
And I do love that bit of music that accompanies him specifically.
I know.
And they planted that like 3 separate times in the movie to build up to that point, which again, long-term storytelling is such... I don't associate long-term storytelling tropes with rom-coms, and it was so refreshing to like watch the film keep building to that point and building to that point.
And that was what's getting me, because as Jess was talking about the marketing that had to like the back and forth they must have had to go throughout the writing process, whether or not they appeal to XYZ crowd, it seemed so natural for them within their narrative to kind of hit those points that universally would be like dead on, where they didn't have to have an extra character here or there to try and flesh it out to reach people. It's like, no, it's just a fun, like romantic narrative. There's goofing around, there's bomb like musical numbers. You get really amped. And then fight scene, I guess.
Right.
As well as like all of these smaller spaces. Like I love the first song when she's singing in the rain in their fake yard. That was just so charming to me, where it's like, okay, I already love her. But it just hits the right tropes, but doing it wholeheartedly in their own way. And I think that's what really like gives it the landslide victory. They weren't trying to hit those points necessarily. It just blended so well with it.
And the scene at the end, the scene where they're getting ready for her wedding and they're kind of doing the pre-wedding kind of ritual, that song, and I don't want to butcher the name again, we'll just call it Medney. That is, for me, when I was watching it last night, all I could think to myself was, when people think of Indian cinema, they are literally thinking of something very close to this scene. Like this exact scene. And while I was watching it, I didn't even think like, oh, this is stereotypical, or, oh, this is really like over the top. I was like, this makes perfect sense. In the entire scope and kind of progression of the film, it all makes sense. The look, everything. I think for me, and again, I am a Westerner raised on Western cinema who, after starting the podcast and having dipped my toe into foreign cinema early on, have kind of gone full bore into a lot of foreign cinema and realized that foreign cinema, realized like I was like some sort of fucking wizard, like everyone else didn't already know this, that foreign cinema really does things that American cinema refuses to. I realized that this film, for me, of the Bollywood films, the Indian cinema films that I've watched so far, this is like the quintessential Indian cinema film. Like, it has everything that I want. I mean, Sholay, I guess you could go in the same direction and say that it's the quintessential Indian cinema film, but I think that this is... You
mean Indian Nightmare on Elm Street is not the quintessential?
Mahakal? No. I haven't watched it yet because I haven't been able to get the subtitles to sync up yet, which is unfortunate because the opening of Indian Nightmare on Elm Street is exactly like the opening of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Amazing. I'm just going to watch it without subtitles.
Including the bum 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 bum.
Oh, wow.
They have it, but it's like a very kind of it's an homage. It's an overt homage without going so close that they're like, now you have to give I forget who does it. Whoever does the theme,
Charles Bernstein.
Yeah, they're like, you don't have to give him money. You're close enough. you're close, but not so close that it's infringing on like the kind of the trademarked or copyrighted.
Like Reanimator and Charles Band basically using Psycho but changing just it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing about Indian cinema is once you realize that there are not only Indian cinema versions of Western films, like there's Indian Jaws. It's called Aatank. and like Jess mentioned, Indian Nightmare on Elm Street or Indian Silence of the Lambs, and then that's kind of the door that opens into the Indian cinema, because it's easy for us Americans to watch something we kind of already know,
right?
And then you dip your toe into something that's like this, where it's like, I know rom-coms, I just don't know this kind of rom-com.
True. See, I was a little spoiled. Growing up, my family was very much involved with foreign university students coming in, since my dad worked there. And we would house them until they found like a place to live or their semester was up, whatever, depending on the case. So I got a great exposure from a lot of like different cultures, but my favorite was my first major exposure to Chinese cinema, where it was the sweetest girl, super quiet, but she always wanted to be like the cool American every now and then. So we got into horror movies, and I showed her, I think we watched like The Conjuring or something that came out recently. And we get to the end and she sits there and she's like, no, this is too happy. And she looks at me and she pulls up all of her pirated movies from China. And of all things that we watched, it wasn't something overly depressing, but she showed me Mr. Vampire. And that was one that I was not expecting to really get behind and amped up. It was like classic kung fu, but like Ghostbuster-ish, but it was set in like deeply involved in their culture. And the whole entire theme was this Catholic church was opening up, and these like monks were trying to close it down because they were resurrecting a Western vampire. So you get like the compare and contrast of both cultures in that movie. And it has like its unique set of moves and comedy and solutions. And I feel that this movie, DDLJ, definitely hits home to where it's like something familiar, but completely different in a new scope. So I don't think you necessarily even have to go the off-brand route to really find something that resonates right off the rip.
I would agree. I think for American audiences, it's easier to get them interested in something they already know.
True. Oh, I'm not getting it for sure.
In a world of franchise, yeah.
Yeah, which brings me to an interesting point. How has this film never been made for American audiences? It's kind of weird, right?
I guess it kind of has. I mean,
I guess it has. Maybe it's just not.
I don't know. I've never.
I would be so sad that the music isn't the music in this film.
I'm not familiar enough with that genre to really know, but I'm sure. But as far as like the story, we've seen it in, all manner of romantic comedies. It's effectively a Romeo and Juliet without, tragedy. It's just, you're poor, I'm rich. Oh no.
I honestly feel that the U.S. goes through flavors of the month when it comes to ripping off different cultures. Right now, we're kind of on a big Japanese kick where it's like they've been redoing animated movies from Japan, and every now and then they kind of coast over to another thing. I think the U.S., for like the bigger budget stuff, it's either very introspective, like what we have with the Marvel movies, or it's whatever's popular with demographic like X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. So I think that like because a lot of bigger companies and writers don't see Indian cinema as anything more than just this goofy slap fest.
And the movies are long. That's the other thing that always gets leveled against Indian cinema is they're 3 hours long.
It's like, whatever, guys.
So was The Irishman. And you know what was more interesting? Not The Irishman.
All of the Indian cinema films I watched this month are 10 times better than The Irishman. And and I guarantee you, large amounts of American audiences have never even heard of Shah Rukh Khan, let alone this film.
No. Right. I mean, hey, maybe Temple of Doom is the gateway movie into this movie.
Yes, if you like Temple of Doom, let me tell you about this romantic comedy.
If I had a theater, I would do a double feature. Temple of Doom and this movie.
Would you play this before or after Temple of Doom?
After. You got to loop them in. But
yeah, I would have to do it after because, I got to settle everybody in, get their drinks, get them nice and buzzed.
But we have to do the like Rocky Horror treatment to DDLJ because come on.
Which, by the way, it actually gets at that movie theater. So
I'm sure it. I would have such a. Can we just get tickets? Oh yeah, that's right. We can't leave.
We can't leave the country.
So we just have to buy a theater here.
Right.
Which at this point is probably more realistic anyway.
Sadly, right?
Here, let's just make it a point, like when we can go travel, let's all go to Mumbai and we'll all three, well, I'll be less out of the water because I've been to India, but still, don't speak the language at all or have ever been to Mumbai. And let's just go and get tickets. And and then people will be like, what the fuck are these people doing?
Oh my God,
who are these three? They know all the songs and everything. What is going on?
Ass motherfuckers walked in here.
Oh yeah. It's about to get lit.
I think it said that the projectionist who shows the film at this theater in Mumbai, he approximates that he has seen the film, and he's been working at the cinema for 46 years. The projectionist has seen the film more than 9,000 times.
I believe it.
That's
pretty great.
Yeah.
I mean, I often wonder how many times I've seen Rocky Horror because of how much I went to it and then watched it other times. It's nowhere near 9,000, but that's still great. So they still have,
it's still showing.
I don't even know why I care about this, but I was like, do they still run it on film or do they run it digitally?
Hey, sometimes you gotta get nerdy with it. I was also curious if it was a legit projector. Like,
you said a projectionist. I'm like, is it a real projection?
It probably is.
See, we'd take Three Guys podcast on the road.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So what actually happened with this cinema in Mumbai is in February of 2015, they stopped showing it, but then they started showing it again because people were like, no, we want to go see this.
Yeah, I'd be that person being like, no.
So as of
the roller rink.
As of March 16th, 2020, which I don't need to talk about the significance of that date for anyone who's living in 2020 right now. That's the film had been showing for 24 years straight, otherwise known as 1,251 weeks.
Wow.
That's insane.
Hella impressive.
How many hours?
Well, let's do 9,000 times 3, so 27,000 hours.
Honestly, that should be a reoccurring trend. I would love for theaters just to play one movie.
We play it forever. You come to this movie theater, this is all you see.
Yes.
Even if it says something different on the marquee, you're seeing the same movie.
I find it kind of funny when we talk about this kind of post movie theater shutdown due to the pandemic. You see movie theaters that don't have new movies to show. And the
drive-ins totally play old school stuff.
Yeah,
it's
they're showing Ghostbusters.
Well, they could play old school stuff, except they just play things that were released within the last 5 years.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, like
here in Ohio.
I mean, there's movie theaters here that are showing like Ghostbusters and stuff to try to get people to show up.
Right.
And it's super.
Those are the cheap ones. Well, and that's the other thing about like showing like retrospective sort of movies is like some of that shit is so expensive to license now, and especially since there's like there would be more of a demand for it. I'm sure that they are like there's a reason Dawn of the Dead is never played at any like convention or marathon or anything, because it is horrendously expensive to license for some reason. There's no standard, but generally in order to license a movie to play at your theater, it's going to cost you anywhere from like $400 to $1,000.
But not Ghostbusters, apparently.
No, Ghostbusters is probably on the cheaper end. I mean, you sit like that, The Big Lebowski, Rocky Horror, like a lot of that stuff that plays. And it really is dependent on the studio and the catalog and who wants to be, a giant dick.
Yeah, that's fair.
But then you have this film that's been showing for 24 years. So...
yeah, they seem like pretty cool people.
I mean, Shah Rukh Khan talks about this film as the film that made his career, and this is the film that made him a star. And he said in an interview that it changed the entire scene for romantic comedies in the 90s. And I can't speak to that latter part, but I would agree with him that this is the film that, for all intents and purposes, kind of vaulted him into the stardom that he has now. I mean, him and Kajol, the actress who plays Simran, would work together 4 more times, and they would be known as the most loved on-screen couple in India. And I think that their rapport back and forth is realistic and believable. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, the back and forth between your two leads really is the kind of whole thing that these kind of romantic comedies are built around. And if they don't have any sort of believable charisma between the two of them, you're not going to be invested in the movie. And
right.
I mean, it just goes to show the interplay between the two is so strong that they would end up to go on to make 4 more movies together as recently as 2015. One of them came out.
Jeez, that's awesome.
The one thing I did have an issue with, and I don't know if either of y'all noticed it, did either of y'all notice how old Shah Rukh Khan looks against his dad, who is like only 8 years older than him?
I was confused. Like, it took me a minute to realize it was his dad. At first, I thought they were just like, I don't know. I was like, that's not his dad. There's just a weird joke is happening here. I'm like, oh, wait, no.
Wait, hold on.
I thought he was just his friend for a minute, and I was like, yeah. Well, and then his mom was also she died when he was a kid.
Yeah.
So they had maybe he was just a really young dad.
So Shah Rukh Khan right now is 54, and Anupam Kher, who plays his father right now, is 65. So they're 11 years apart. It was just
man.
It was the one thing that kind of took me out of the film, because all I could keep thinking was like, that guy doesn't look like his dad. It looks like his brother.
Yeah, that's
like his older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's such a small complaint, but because of how big of a part his father plays in the film, it was kind of hard to overlook it.
True.
Because he just looks, it's just like, dude, that guy looks like your friend. He doesn't look like your dad. Like, that's like...
It's your friend.
Yeah.
Dadder face.
But Farida Jalal, who plays Simran's mother, I think for me is such an interesting character that we don't get to see in a lot of rom-coms.
Yeah, I liked her a lot. I wanted to see her more in the movie, honestly. If I have any issues, it would be that I would have liked to see a bit more interaction between her and Amarish Puri, because I think that their characters, because they were obviously also married out of an arranged marriage, I would think.
One would assume.
She goes on this whole kind of like, speech to her daughter about how she never wanted her daughter to have to be like this, and she would vow that, like she was going to let her live her own life, but then she realized that, women aren't even allowed to really make promises, because once you're married, you don't really have any authority over anything, and you don't have any authority. If you're doing it in this specific way of the culture, you don't have any authority of choosing who you get married to either. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes, obviously, I would think more often than not, it's not, a truly happy marriage. But I do think that these two are happy, her mother and father, and I think that they do love each other. And I would have liked to see a little bit more interaction between them and kind of how their relationship works. But it's a small gripe.
This is a small gripe for a 3-hour long movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Where we're not griping about the length of the film.
No, honestly, we would sit and watch plenty more.
I would have liked like 1 or 2 more songs, I think.
Yeah, even if it was just slapped at the very end, like our 90s movies where we get a music video at the end. Yes. Please and thank you.
Exactly. All through the credits.
Yeah, I need to see a musical number about the movie I just watched.
I mean, I would have given another 2 hours to this movie. just give me some more. Like, that is the thing about this movie that I do appreciate. And Jess, we kind of talked about this when we talked about Robo. It does give the characters a story arc from beginning to end. But in this film, unlike Robo, I did want more of the characters. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's just I wanted more of Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol's interplay. Which, I mean, apparently there's 4 other movies, and each one is probably 3 hours long, so...
There you go.
Yeah.
Our wishes have been granted.
Exactly. I just go watch one of those movies. Or all of them.
Or just rewatch this one. I'm totally going to rewatch this one.
I mean, the music in this movie alone. I mean,
so boss.
I know, like we talked about the music a lot this month because, again, while it might be a stereotype, it is true. Indian cinema has a lot of music, which I appreciate because, again, they're all bangers for the most part.
Yeah, they're really good.
And they don't
I want this album on my MP3 so that I could be jazzed every day.
Yeah, I mean, some of these songs are, I mean, not some, all of them are really good. The music in this film versus something like Parindo, which we talked about in the last episode, where the music kind of got in the way towards the end. I never felt like the music got in the way in this film, and it honestly felt like the music was always there. There just wasn't any vocals sometimes. It was just, the music was just kind of waiting to swell back up and kind of insert itself back into the film, which we didn't really see in some of the other films this month.
Definitely cohesively fit. I absolutely love that there was no need for a transition or a big musical number. It was fit so well. And considering so many of these smaller scenes that happened in between carried that same energy, it was perfect. Flawless.
And the other thing, and Jess can attest to this, I think it also makes a huge difference that, you know, we had the subtitles for the songs.
Yes. We did not have them on Robo, which is...
Oh, bummer.
sad.
Or Parinda, or Sholay. None of the films I've watched this month have had subtitles during the music.
Oh, and that sucks. That would destroy my experience.
It totally does, because you assume... and clearly rightly so when you're watching something like this, that the plot, well, while the plot may not be moved along by the music is integral to the character building.
I mean, yes, but as an opera freak, that would destroy so much of it for me, because the lyrics alone, they were so much fun. Like the drinking song was so perfect because of that. It carried the attitude. Yeah, you know that, oh, they're drunk and shenanigans, but the way that they delivered the lines, it was a great back and forth.
I agree.
That stinks that you didn't have the subtitles for those.
And I will also say that unlike American cinema, where audiences get bent out of shape when actors aren't singing their own parts, in Indian cinema, they seem to just not give a shit. Hire the people that know how to sing and let the actors act.
Right. Well,
you don't have to be a triple threat. It's fine.
Right. Well, and they had such a good charismatic delivery on it. Like I said, everything that needed to be over the top was in such a way where it blended over a bunch of the stuff that would come off as janky typically. Because, I mean, throughout the movie, I noticed it's not the same person that's singing and dancing, but the high energy performance of every single number was just perfect.
I agree.
I do think that these songs actually, like the dubbing used for them, are a bit more seamless than they were in Robo. I noticed it more in Robot, but it's not a problem. It doesn't matter to me. I don't need the actor to be everything.
No, because we've seen what that means in American cinema, and in American cinema we get something like Johnny Depp's serviceable version of Sweeney Todd, or Russell Crowe completely cocking up Les Mis.
I was totally thinking about that. I still have yet to watch that, and that is like my one reservation. Is it's like, I know the music, I don't want to watch the music being butchered.
Yeah. It's also a 3-hour-long movie.
Well, that's fine. Once again, I sit through operas pretty regularly. Jess can attest that most of the time she walks down and it's probably something long as fuck.
True.
To be fair, we as Western audiences wouldn't know if they were butchering the music, to be fair.
I mean,
we
know,
might,
man.
I guess.
The theater kids would.
I was going to say, Maggie comes from a much more artistically inclined family who actually care about shit like that.
Except for I'm sure my parents hate Les Mis, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, your mom and your uncle are classically.
Yeah, my mom and my uncle are classically trained, and my father and my mother still do choir to this day. Mom, Chris, for context, She was in the Cleveland Orchestra, so she was like pretty top tier. They even got a Grammy one of the years that they were in. But I mean, they can respect the fact that there's an authenticity behind that, but they also know the reality behind performances like that. I always love hearing my mom complain about operatic singers, and it's like, well, you don't scream like that. Like, nobody screams like that. And have you tried singing while laying down? It's almost impossible. So finding ways to like kind of skirt around those issues, like everybody's so freaking stiff when they're delivering their lines, because it's like, that is technically such a ridiculous piece to sing. You have to be able to bridge the gap to make it that authentic. And that's where you get like the theater kids who are diehard. No, whoever's doing the acting must do the singing as well. But it's like, I don't know. You guys are super squad. I don't mind if somebody is dubbed over so long as it doesn't look like a crap dub.
You mean like in Bohemian Rhapsody?
I'm still avoiding that.
I would avoid it like the plague or the pandemic. Take your pick.
Yeah, right. Either way, I'm avoiding both.
Yeah, it's not good because it's someone doing what, you know, you're talking about, which is them being dubbed over. But we all know Rami Malek can't sing, and we also all know that Rami Malek can't sing like Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask of one person. If he came right out of the gate with high energy and dubbed over, maybe, but.
Well, it's also that weird quandary of dubbing over a real person. You're meant to play a real person. I think that's also one of the bigger failings with something like that is when you're playing a fictional character, it's easier to dub over because you're not familiar with the voice.
You get to make that character your own.
Exactly.
You're not stifled with trying to imitate somebody exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, it works in this film. I mean, even to the point where Amrish Puri starts singing, which I think for me is probably one of the top 5 moments of this film. Because the way the camera fools you into thinking it's someone else, and then you realize it's Amrish Puri. And again, like Jess has been mentioning, and like I mentioned at the beginning, he plays Mola Ram in Temple of Doom. Like that is the only thing I had ever seen him in. And seeing him in this film, I think I texted it to you last night, Jess. I was like, it's weird seeing him with hair.
Yeah.
It's completely foreign to me to see Amrish Puri with hair because, again, when he's only known for one thing in the States, which is Mola Ram, a bald villain, I was like, oh, okay. I think the thing that endeared the film to me the most was Amrish Puri's character. I almost might even go on a limb and say that the film is as much his story as it is their story. Yes. I mean, he opens the film.
That's true. And I mean, that's why I would wanted to see a little bit more between him and his wife and kind of get more in his headspace. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter because it goes where it goes.
No, but again, I mean, that's a testament to his ability as an actor, is Absolutely. to make you want more. So I would be interested to see the film that he was in called Mr. India, which he is also known for, which is an Indian superhero film made in 1987. So, yeah, I know. There's like so many doors are being opened by this month, and all of them cannot be gone through. There's not enough time in the day to go through all of them.
It's just really good, guys. Just watch it. Just watch the film. Help us open a theater to only play this film, and let's beat the 9,000 record. All right, USA.
And I would also like to point out something that we talked about on the last podcast, and we'll talk about here for those of you who want to know how to find this film. It's on YouTube in its entirety, and it's also on Amazon Prime in its entirety with the subtitles that we're talking about. So I'm no excuse for not wanting to watch it. Oh, and on top of everything else, while Netflix does not have this film, Netflix, for those of you that don't know, is actually full of Indian cinema. Like, really full of Indian cinema. So those are all really easy, convenient places to find it instead of watching the newest season of what's the Top Gear thing? The Amazing Show or some nonsense? Don't watch nonsense on Amazon Prime, which is almost all that is on Amazon Prime. And watch this
There
instead.
are a lot of great 70s horror gems on there.
There's also Supermarket Sweep.
Yes, that's true.
That's also on Netflix.
Is Supermarket Sweep on Netflix now?
Yeah.
Oh,
They got rid of Cheers and put that on.
Well, I mean, you know, you trade one good thing for one thing that is aged so poorly it's not even funny. But it's nice to see all those old products again.
Oh, and for those low prices.
Yeah, exactly. A box of pasta for 20 cents? No way. Yes way.
Oh, what happened to us?
Box of pasta for $1 yesterday. I was like, damn.
This is cheap. So, Maggie, what would you give DDLJ out of 5?
Oh my gosh. I would give them what's a great inconceivable amount?
5, because that rarely happens on this podcast.
Gosh.
Apparently, except for this month where I think I've given every movie I've watched a 5.
Hey, I don't blame you. I would say I give it a 5 and the 3 consecutive thumbs up in the film.
There you go.
That last thumbs up that finished it off, that is the most genuine thumbs up I have ever seen in my life. It's that specific thumbs up that I give this film. And
that look of elation on Amrish Puri's face just sells it.
Yes.
100%.
Yes, that is I'm giving you my permission. Love this film unconditionally.
What about you, Jess? What would you give the film out of 5?
Oh, as a person who generally hates rom-coms, I'm going to give this movie a 5 because I actually really liked it. And it made me want to watch, I guess, more Indian rom-coms. So.
Yes.
I am right there with both of y'all. I am giving this film a 5. It is at times...
3 guys, seal of approval.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is at times endearing. It is at times very serious and kind of, very obsessed with talking about the culture, which, again, rom-coms never do. And at times it's also, completely over the top and bombastic and kind of allows the actors to kind of show off their comedic side. So I'm giving it a 5, and I think I've given everything this month a 5. So, oops. I don't know.
It's a gold star month.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And look, I think that that's just a testament to Indian cinema and its ability to cross cultural boundaries. Because I've had an issue in the past watching foreign cinema and having a hard time following along, and I don't think it's the filmmaker's fault. I think it's partially my fault and partially just cultural, lacking or misunderstanding. And I have had none of that this month. Aside from some of the things we mentioned, Jess, when we talked about Robo, which are some of the maybe more cultural intricacies. Right. But this film does a good job of kind of setting those all out on the table for you to understand. So, yeah, I would give it 5 all the way. So that's it for Indian Cinema Month. Let's talk about what we're going to be talking about next month on the Culture Cast.
Oh, for God, Don.
What is this man saying? What is this man doing?
What in the hell's the matter with you?
What is this man's name?
My name is Igor Stravinsky.
Hi there, I'm Harry S. Truman.
I'm Don Corleone.
They call him Fletch.
Fletch F. Fletch.
He's good at defending himself.
Better tie your shoelaces.
Oh! Disguising himself. And getting himself into trouble.
Well, it be Fletch. Go ahead. Make my day.
He's a reporter.
There are no tags on these mattresses.
Who's about to write the story of a lifetime.
Will you kill me?
Sure.
If he lives.
Thanks a lot!
There isn't a woman he can't charm.
Can I borrow your towel for a sec? My car just hit a water buffalo.
A question he won't ask.
You and your wife are currently alive, I take it?
Drop your shorts and bend over, Mr. Babar.
A risk he won't take.
Probably feel 100%
Moon River. To get to the truth.
Well, looks like you two have a lot to talk over. We'll just catch the last 10 minutes of Dynasty.
Universal Pictures presents Chevy Chase as Fletch.
My hero.
Welcome to it.
That's right. Next month, we are going to be talking about an actress and her films in a very specific decade, thanks to our good friend Father Malone. It's You've Never Seen September, and we're talking about Gina Davis in the 80s. Yes, it's oddly specific. And yes, there aren't very many films, actually. that she did in the 80s, but they are very well known. And on the next episode of the Culture Cast, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite films of all time, Fletch. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Fletch on the next episode, and our good friend from pulpserenade.com, Cullen Gallagher, will be joining me to talk about the film and probably to talk about the book, since I know he had mentioned he wanted to read the book before the podcast, so hopefully he reads it. If not, I've read it, so we can talk about it then. Until then, where can people find you, Maggie?
Probably just Instagram, because I have no life. But I am Maggie the Odd on Instagram, and I guess on YouTube too. There's not much going on, but by all means.
What about you, Jess?
You can find me on Twitter at writer Jess Byard. I pretty much post everything that I do there. But if you want to hear Chris and I together talking about things not movie related, you can hear us on our podcast, The One Season Show, where we talk about television that lasted one season. And you can hear us at Scary Stories We Tell, our podcast, where we dive into paranormal, true crime, and all matter of unexplained, interesting things. And I guess you can find also on Instagram all of those things that I just mentioned.
And you can find Maggie and Jess hanging out in Akron, Ohio, enjoying that sweet, sweet Ohio air.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Riding on their Goodyear tires.
Yeah, those I'll stand by.
Yeah, those haven't. Akron hasn't smelled like rubber in a long time.
But the city of Akron's Twitter has some mad clapback.
Oh, it sure do.
Some mad clapback.
I mean, hey, you can't fight a city that already hates itself.
Yeah. Now you just take a cheap shot.
Yeah.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at casualty_Chris. And as always, you can find the podcast on Twitter at CultureCast and at culturecast.com. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/culturecast. If you want to kick a couple dollars our way, that's great. If not, hey, I totally get it. Times is hard, as they would say. I think Helena Bonham Carter said that, actually. Times is hard. Times is hard. And big thanks to Maggie and Jess for joining me, and we'll catch you on the next episode.